Well, my name is Joy Harvey. I paint and teach Chinese calligraphy, which is an Asian style of painting done on specialized paper with specialized brushes and an indelible ink, which is made of pine soot, oil, and glue. So it forms an indelible surface with the specialized papers. And I do believe that I am the only person, Asian or Caucasian, who teaches Chinese calligraphy in this valley. I was born down in Orange, right outside of Santa Ana. But my parents moved up here into the valley when I was very small. They went up to Turlock. And then my dad was transferred to Bakersfield. And I was a toddler. I wasn't even in school. So I was raised in Bakersfield. It was a small town then. My mother insisted on piano and dance lessons for my sister and I, and really didn't have any formal art education at all until I went to college. And then I took some basic drawing and painting courses and ceramic courses, and I liked all of it. After I graduated, I got married, I went to work, I just didn't have any time, I didn't have any money. And it wasn't until really my kids were teenagers that I was able to start studying art. And after I graduated from college and came back down to the valley, I was married and I moved to San Diego. And I lived there 35 years. I started painting in San Diego, actually at the University of California in San Diego, with a Chinese teacher, Jing Shuaishan, who I studied with for 15 years. And I actually fell into it almost by accident, because a friend said, I'm going to go take brush painting at the University of California. Why don't you come with me? And I said, oh, I don't know. And she said, come on, I dare you. And so, of course, I went. And I'm still painting and she's not. I just fell in love with it. First class. The very first class, I thought, oh, I like this. And that's why I stayed with Jean for 15 years. During the time that I was studying with her, I had a chance to go to China and study at an art academy there for a month. So I went over and did that. And it was like jumping off a mountain with a giant parachute, because it was like, oh boy, this is really what I want to do. And that was in 1987. So I have been going back ever since then. I've gone back about 22 times now to China. And I've been studying at that same academy with master teachers and different faculty on and off ever since 1987. And as a matter of fact, I went this last year in 19. I took 6 more people with me. I've been taking artists with me for years to study with the program there. And the year before that, I brought back a teacher from China to teach at one of my art camps. I teach 2 art camps in Cambria. They're week-long painting camps. And I brought him over to teach at my camp for a week along with me. And so that was a lot of fun to kind of have this international exchange program, really. And then when my husband retired, he wanted to come back up to this valley. And so he loved playing golf at River Island. We used to come up for golf tournaments all the time, and we had bought a piece of property there. So we moved up here, and that was 26 years ago. And so I wanted to be not in Bakersfield and not in Fresno. And the golf course was Springville, so Springville it is. And suddenly I was in need of a studio. So I came up into town and I rented a small place in town, and it was really too small and I couldn't have students there. So when this space came open, I talked to the landlords, and they actually had called me to tell me it was available. Would I come and move into it? I talked to them and we came to a nice agreement, and I moved in, and it was so spacious that I thought, oh, this is simple. I can have my gallery here. I can have all my supplies, which in a whole other room back there, and I can set up my tables and have students. So instead of just teaching over in Visalia, I started teaching here also. So I have a day class here and a night class in Visalia. And then I teach at Cuesta College over in San Luis Obispo 3-4 times a year, sometimes 5. I'm adjunct teacher over there, so I'll teach weekend classes. And then I teach 2 week-long painting camps in Cambria. I do one in February and one in August. And so my teaching schedule is really full. But I spend a lot of time here in the studio painting, mounting paintings for myself and for my students. I teach how to carve seals, the red chops that go on the paintings up in the corners. I teach my students how to carve those. I have all the supplies I bought in China. It just seems like there aren't enough hours in the day. I'd had an art show at College of the Sequoias, and it was very successful. I sold more than half of the paintings I was showing, and people kept saying, well, are you going to give classes? And I was like, I don't think so. I don't think so. And finally I thought, well, why not? There was nobody here who could teach because I was looking for another teacher. And I was still going to China, and that was the only time I ever got to learn more and new. So I made arrangements in Visalia to start teaching classes, and they filled up right away. Suddenly, you know, my little avocation became a vocation, and I've been teaching ever since. In fact, teaching way more than I ever thought I would. My classes in China, every time I've gone, I've learned something new, something brand new, something that would make an aha moment. And in fact, in China, they're always looking for, while they'll talk about revering the past, which they do, they're always talking about breaking into new fields, new ways of doing things. The calligrapher, Wang Dongling, is a master calligrapher in China. I've studied with him since 1987. And I see him regularly when I go to China. He has work all over the world. You know, Paris, Germany, New York, San Francisco. The Asian Art Museum was up watching him do a demo in Hangzhou when I was there, and he invited me to it, so I was there when all of them were there. And he is just broken into a whole new writing style that he has developed that is brand new and nobody else is doing it. So, you know, they're always trying to push the envelope, find something new. Every genre that's come up from the beginning, I mean, 6,000 years ago in China, there'll be a school, and it'll be the traditional school until somebody breaks those rules. And then there'll be another school. And that happens in the art world universally. And so I take copious notes. I bring back notebook after notebook filled with new ideas, new techniques, and I pass every one of those on to my students. It's really a wonderful thing to see people develop a style, and I don't make them paint like me. I don't want them to paint like me. I try to find out where they are and what appeals to them, whether they like a freestyle painting or a detail style painting. Do they draw? If they don't draw, I try to get them to start drawing. And then as I work with them on technique and subject matter, pretty quick they start figuring out how to look at things in a whole new way, how to really see things. I do get people who come to me and say, well, I want to do that, but I'm not an artist, or I can't draw. That's usually what people say. And you don't have to be an artist to learn to do art. What you have to do is want to be prepared to learn technique, to practice, or like the piano. You don't sit down and play a whole etude first day. You start with scales. And so I start all my students with beginning strokes, how to hold the brush, how to sit, how to use the paper, how to use resource materials, transfer it into what we're doing. And miraculously, they all become artists. Because once they get into it and they start thinking about seeing in a new way and interpreting things in a new way, they just sort of become an artist. And that brings me a great deal of joy. I have a student who moved to Fresno, and I understand that occasionally she'll give a class. She gives some watercolor classes, and occasionally she'll do a brush painting class. I was happy to see her go on and do other things. She was studying with me in Visalia for quite a while, and she went up to Fresno to be closer to her daughter who was going to college there. So, but I see her work every now and then. I'm kind of proud of where she is now with what she learned. I think if you know how to express something and somebody wants to know how, you should show them how. You should unlock that door. Otherwise, they may just bang against it, not find a way how to go through. And why not help them go through? Why not help them become happier in art, happier with the art that they do? I feel people have been good to me, and so I'm happy to pass it on. I collaborate with a Chinese artist in LA, Tom Chow is his name, and he's a fine artist, a wonderful calligrapher. And he and I teach the same way, our philosophies are the same way, because he's trained the way I was, classically trained with this style of art. And so we collaborate, we work together on calligraphies and paintings, and he's the one who calls me to LA quite often to participate in these shows. And frankly, there aren't a lot of Caucasians who show in these higher shows, but there are becoming more and more of them. And it's because of people like Jean and people like Tom and me who tell people, this art style is not limited to China. Anybody can learn it. I've studied with every nationality with my classes, both classes that I've been in and classes that I've taught. Anyone can do this. Anyone who wants to and will put in the work and the time and the effort to learn the techniques and practice them will learn to do them. Because there's nobody around here who mounts Chinese paintings or who mounts scrolls. And then the papers, in order to be shown, must be wet mounted. And I learned to do that also. A lot of my work I take back to China and I have it mounted with a silk border. I have it put in scrolls. And the scrolls are usually, they can run from 4 feet to about 8 feet long. And I don't find very many places to exhibit them here. Most galleries don't want to hang scrolls, they want to hang traditionally mounted paintings. The Chinese particularly like very muted colors. They like more ink, less color. Very soft burnt siennas, very soft indigo blues, mostly inks. Americans, however, love color. So if I want to paint to an American taste, I have to paint with more color than I normally would just from what I've been taught. So to paint to sell, I generally will bump up colors more, simply because that's what the public here wants. When I'm in China, they want everything very muted, very soft, mostly ink. A lot of times the paintings are nothing but ink, gradations of ink. They'll say, all the colors are in the ink. All the colors. They don't look as ink as the absence of color. They look at it as the color. I have taken them down to LA and shown them in Asian art shows in the Taiwanese Art Center shows. And I've shown them in China at judged shows, actually. So I actually scored up in the top tier Chinese calligraphy in a judge show in China. That was a show that had Korean, Chinese, and Japanese artists. It was quite a long time ago, but it was an exhibition show, and you had to be juried in, and then you were judged. And so I actually have the certificate from that showing me, it's all in Chinese, showing where I placed in the show. Yeah, I'm proud of that one. It's really rewarding. I have made wonderful friendships because of this, and I have met wonderful artists just participating in different shows around the valley. And I've shown, all the way up to the Bay Area and all the way down to San Diego and all the way over to the coast. And I've given workshops in that whole area too. And man, this has been a wonderful, wonderful journey. And with Chinese brush painting, there are several maxims that are really, really true. One is that you see the large through the small. So you can see a whole landscape through a tree and a hill and a rock. And you also see small through large. So you can see the whole tree, but you can paint one branch with some leaves. So there's always this yin-yang feeling, and it is imbued in every part of what I do, because part of the painting will be dense and part will be sparse. So there's that yin-yang. Part will be dark and part will be light. So part will be wet and some will be dry. It just goes on, and the more you work with it, the more you see that it's valuable. There is a host in the painting, so that's where your eye usually goes first. And then there's a guest. So there's another yin-yang part of this painting. And then maybe if it's a flower painting, there's a beautiful blossom, and then that's the host, and there's a bud, that's the guest. And maybe there's some bees, and those are auxiliary guests. So it all becomes balanced. When you have yin and you have yang, you have balance. Everybody likes to bring everything down to the simplest common denominator, the word, but it really is a philosophy. And what I do is also goes way, way back to Taoism. Part of Buddhism comes into it in some parts, Confucianism. All of the history of China gets wrapped up into its art. And art does reflect nature, but art also reflects our everyday life and what goes on in our everyday life. It's also been used strongly to delineate beliefs of politicism. And especially in China, I've seen a lot of work that was talking about Japanese occupation of China, or the Mandarins and the Mongolians, and their whole political scene for centuries and centuries and centuries. It's all been part and parcel of art, just like our art reflects everything that goes on in our day too. I think that what we do generally and what I teach doesn't imbue that, but these people who are learning from me could definitely make political statements with their art if that's what they wish to do. Not all the work that you see on the walls is mine. Some of them are presents from faculty and staff in China at the academy. The big one over there up on the wall, up above the window, that was given to me by the director of the foreign exchange program. After coming quite a few years, Ren Daobing, before I left, came up to me and presented me with the calligraphy. So I had it mounted in silk and had it hanging here because it's a lovely couplet about the beauties of the city of Hangzhou, which is where the academy is. It's on the eastern side of China, about 2 hours below Shanghai. I can't just read it, I have to sit and translate it. They're pictograms sometimes, and phonic symbols, the characters are. And so I teach all my students to write their name in Chinese and their numbers in Chinese, and they learn to do different characters. I have sheets that show the character and what it means in English and how to use it and how to say it. And so they learn simple characters like flower and bird and horse and day and night and, things like that. So I can pick out simple things. I can speak bits of Chinese. Like when I get in China and I hear it all the time, I can speak quite a bit. When I get over here, I forget it. But I can do what I call point and talk Chinese, and I make myself known. And I also carry a little dictionary with me. So I do fine in China. But mostly I'm proud of the friendships I've made there, the acquaintances that I have. So we do a lot of plein air sketching, a lot of plein air painting. It's really quite a classical education, much like you would find in Europe, but just a different technique. It's not oils, although they do oils in that campus, they do everything. But mostly I stick with the traditional Chinese brush painting and traditional Chinese calligraphy. Usual, most people do one thing. They do flower and bird, or they do landscape, or they do portrait, or they do calligraphy. I do all four. And of those genres, there is what they call detail or elaborate, and that's the drawn style. And then there's the freestyle, which is just ink and shapes, like the horse over here to your right. And that's all freestyle. So it's the idea of it. Nothing's delineated, there's no outline. It's all just brushwork, free brushwork. And then there's a combination. Now these ladies are all detail, and they're drawn with a very fine brush and a super steady hand. I mean, I have to be in a really good mood to do that kind of work because it's so fine and so detailed. But the loose leaf bamboo, for instance, that is freestyle. Freestyle is called Shei, and the detail style is called Gongbi. And then there's a combination style, so sometimes something will be fairly carefully drawn and some of it will be a little freestyle. If I'm a little loose that day, I'm going to do Shei. If I'm kind of wound up, I'm going to do Gongbi. Well, I had a teacher, one who I really admire in China, tell me that every artist has grades. So you come along, it's like a fish swimming upstream, and you reach the first dam. And if you're content in your puddle, you stay there. And if you're not, you jump over and you swim upstream, you learn more and more, and you become more knowledgeable as you go upstream. And you come to another dam. And then how high you're going to reach in your craft is how much drive you have to learn more. How many dams are you willing to jump over? So if you're content with one genre, then you'll stay there. Now you can jump small dams within that genre, become better and better within your genre. But if you want to learn other genres or even expand abilities, you sometimes have to take that leap. And it's hard. It's hard to leave your comfort zone and go to something that you're not good at, something that you have to struggle with. And there have been times when I have just wanted to crumple up my work, throw it out the window and say never again. But in order to get over that, I have to sort of say that this is childish and I need to learn how to do this so that I can become a better artist. I can't teach more if I don't learn more. So I push myself. I work really hard to reach the next dam and find a way to get over it. Young artists should study with as many teachers as they can afford. It's just imperative to learn, not from just one person, one style, one technique, but to learn from as many people as you can manage to learn from. Because everybody's going to have a different way of looking at their art and at art and how they produce it. And so you take all of that in and you percolate it, and then you make it your own. You pull out the parts that are really, really important to you, and you make those your own. This is an underpainting because I want to have some darks that are fading. So I'm going to put these into damp paper and let those dry. And they're really going to be very, very, very pale. They don't look real pale now, but they'll be pale. Straight with a brush. I used this brush right here, this tiny, tiny pointed brush. It's actually a calligraphy brush for small calligraphy. So it has soft hairs around the outside and really hard, like 4 hairs in the center. So I can use a really fine tip, but it has enough soft hair around the belly that it will hold enough juice for me to keep going with it. So Generally, I'll use a lot more hard brushes than I do soft. But if I'm going to do big soft things like this, big areas, then I will use a soft white haired brush. Otherwise, the hard hair is like deer and wolf and weasel and bear and rat whisker. They use just about every kind of hair. But a badger hair brush is very expensive, just like hair. I'll come in and I'll go use these 2 or 3 times before this painting is through. These leaves will probably be glazed 4 or 5 times. The lotus, it'll depend, because I'll probably use a wet brush, dry brush technique. So I'll have one brush that's dry and one brush that's wet, and I'll lay down some color with the wet, and then I'll push it around and lift it up with the dry brush and blend it and blend it and blend it. So quite often what I'll do is I'll make sure that the petal is damp to begin with, just a little bit of water. And then I'll come back with a little bit of color and then a dry brush. So here's my dry brush. This will be my wet brush. I'll pick up some of the chip color. I've been looking at all the egrets and in the different waterways around here, and they're really active this time of year. Started thinking about them. I started thinking, well, maybe it's time to paint a couple more egret paintings. I haven't done some for a while, so it might just be that time of year. Think about it. So what I'm doing now is putting a little tiny bit of burnt sienna over the ink work. And when it dries, it will have kind of a warm look to it because the water is going to be very cool. And the lotus leaves will be a very soft green. So I need, this looks like it's going to be bright, but it's not. It's going to fade to just half or less of what I already have there. So I just want to get those little bit of undertones in there. I paint out of tube colors, and I also paint out of what are called chip colors, which are solid colors that either come in a little bowl like this or in a big chip like that yellow, which I have to be careful about because it's actually made out of arsenic, so I don't want to eat it. It's kind of an interesting thing. The minute I put colored water to it, it'll just turn into that beautiful yellow, and it'll be a very pretty yellow. So these will be the under colors for these. And then when they dry down, I'll go ahead and put more in. I keep in touch with them by WeChat, and the school has mostly been shut down, but it is reopened. Generally, I would be going in October. I'd be going back. Guess what? This year I'm not. But and I feel badly because I planned on going back another year, but it's just not the time to do it. Well, yeah, I've lost everything. I've lost every class I've had at Cuesta College. I've lost my camps. I've lost my night classes. I lost my college reunion. I lost my trip to China. I've lost, Well, I have my studio. Yeah. So I'm actually doing very well. I spend my mornings at home. I come in the afternoon to my studio. So I think I'm really fortunate because I have my studio here. I have really good friends. I have people who check up on me. So, it all works. It would just be a lot nicer if I had my real life back. But it could be a lot worse. You know, I could be one of the ones who's sick. That's a huge problem for an awful lot of people. Unfortunately, all my classes paid for my studio, you know, so that overhead was met by my classes. So I don't have that right now. So that's not a happy thing, but it could be worse. I'm adding a little of the indigo to the burnt sienna areas so that I have the warm and the cool together. Oh, it's kind of nice to make that neutral statement. I can put in really darks if I want to, but I like to glaze them when I do this because it's richer. It just gives more to it. Not everybody does, and I think everybody has to feel their own colors. You know, I play with mine a lot so that I get a feel of what's going to work with what. Well, I guess I'd like to learn that new calligraphy technique that Wong has been developing. He writes in a grass style, which is, there's walking style, which is printing, and then there's a cursive style. And then there is a little more cursive, you know, it's not abstract, but it's kind of freestyle writing. And then there's grass style writing, which is sort of like doctor's writing, but worse. And so it's unless you know the actual character that's underneath there, you don't know, you can sort of guess at what this character is. And the ones who write it actually are masters at it. They sit around and talk about how to write it to get enough of it in there, but not have all of it in there. So sometimes they can only read their own writing. It's very beautiful. I have done some semi-grass, I would say, that's very good, and I've done it in China. But I think I would like to learn to extrapolate it even more. You know, because I can look at couplets that are written in font, and I can write them in 3 styles, 4 styles. So I write them in ancient seal, I can write them in walking, standing, walking, running, you know. But I can't extrapolate them into grass. So I think I would like to learn to do that. Well, I've got most of the underpainting is done now. And so I'm going to go ahead, I'm trying to see how dry it is. You know, my hand is 98.6, so I can use it to dry down areas because the paper is so thin. So it dries a little faster than watercolor paper. Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes, and I've done worse than just accidentally smudge it. I've come up with terrible globs. One of them I had just finished a whole big group of pansies, and I put my brush down and it rolled right over and I just left a big glob on it. So I let it dry down, and then I made a butterfly out of it because I didn't want to lose the painting. It was really a nice painting. So it worked out, but it can scare you to death. So if I need a really fine brush, you know, I'll use this 2-hair brush. But most of the time I paint with fatter brushes because they just hold more juice. The belly's big enough to load them up and hold enough juice. But it gets tricky sometimes to figure out what's gonna work. I'm listed at Arts Visalia. I belong to the Arts Consortium. I am part of Camp Ocean Pines in Cambria, so I'm on their website. I am listed, my classes are listed at Cuesta College. There's always word of mouth that shows. I have cards and I hand them out. I take part in the South Valley Art Tour. You know, my phone number is listed in the telephone book. So call me, my hours here are by appointment only. But that's because when I'm in here working, sometimes I just want to work. And it's not a store, it's a gallery, my work is for sale, but I'm not a 10 to 5 store. I'm always here on Thursday mornings teaching, but there are exceptions. But mainly, I think they can get my number through the Arts Consortium or Arts Visalia or the phone book.